Hey, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. And today we are covering Lasting Tales, a fantasy miniatures game. And I didn't think I was going to cover this one in a dedicated video because, frankly, I have, well, no interest in the actual game itself. And yet I'm covering it, and it's because it's doing well. Now, more specifically, it's because this is one that, well, I guess let's take a back step. So first of all, this is going to be from Blacklist Games. It's going to be their miniatures line combined with a miniatures game at the same time. Now, they've done 3 in this series so far. To begin with, they had the Blacklist Miniatures Fantasy Series 1, which did incredibly well with 16,000 backers, well over $1 million, or well as a relative word, but over $1 million, raising a ton of things, having over 200 miniatures for the low price of $65 for over 200 miniatures, including a giant dragon, a game that I backed, that I'm a miniatures line that I backed, that I'm waiting for it to arrive, that I'm curious to see the miniature quality, production, that the size of the dragon, the giants, all those different things, all for the price of $65, which is quite literally a steal. Well, not quite literally, although the new definition of literally does mean figuratively, that a thing that still bothers me, and yet I use it that way, so I don't really know if I can complain, because I am, after all, quite literally part of the problem. But that is a ridiculous tangent. Let's go back to this game. So Fantasy Series Line 1 did incredibly well, and so they came back later. They came back again with a fantasy series, or not a fantasy, with a horror series, the Dire Alliance Horror. This is going to be combining a game with a line of horror miniatures, although the horror miniatures they went with were kind of a Victorian horror, which does seem to have gotten them some pushback if you follow the campaign. There were a lot of people who were interested. Keep in mind, 3,000 backers, $237,000 raised. There are many campaigns that would love to have those numbers, and yet I can't help but think that Blacklist Games thought it would do better, and I thought it would do better. But a combination of maybe the game, maybe the miniatures, maybe whatever, all those things contribute to a line of miniatures that did well, but nowhere near as well as the original fantasy series that ended up at over 105 miniatures, a far cry from the 200 miniatures you got in Fantasy Series 1, making it a much worse back, all things considered. Now, the game is good. I played Dire Alliance. I enjoyed it, and it is a solid system, and it's one that I wasn't thematically pulled in by the horror line, and it seems many others weren't. It's one of those things, I've talked about this before, I will talk about it again. But we frequently hear that people want new themes, they want creative themes, they don't want the same old zombies and fantasy, they want things that are different. And yet people continuously pay for the things that are the same. I can't help but think that if Blacklist Games decides to put out a Cthulhu line of miniatures, those would do equally well, but their horror theme, the thing that there's something different, it didn't do as well, and something we've seen with Blacklist Games themselves in their other campaigns. If we look at some of their other games that they've brought to the table, from the Brook City, we have Streetmaster, we have Brook City, we have Streetmaster again, we have Alter Quest, we have Hour of Need. Now, so basically we have superheroes, we have medieval fantasy, and we have buddy cop and Streetmasters, whatever you want to call that, the whatever genre that would be. Guess which one did the best from all of those? If you guessed Alter Quest, if you guessed the medieval line of whatever, the medieval game system, then you're correct. It's because it's again and again we see people asking for new things, asking for creative. I'm sick and tired of the same old knights and zombies and all those things, and yet people seem to back the things that are the same. So that's kind of that. But that brings us back to Lasting Tales, a fantasy series miniatures game, which is giving you the option to buy Lasting Tales, which is going to be a rule set allowing you to play a miniatures game with any set of, well, anything. As well as that, you're going to have the ability to buy various components, which I'll go through on the page shortly. Various components from pads to cards, different things to augment the experience, to make it easier so you don't have to constantly reference the rulebook or print out your own rule sheets. And then we're going to have Fantasy Series Line 2, as well as Fantasy Series Line 1, all of those things being available. Now, allow me to briefly pause my video because apparently I have a wandering little child who decided to join me for this. And so we're going to go ahead and pause this video, and I will be back in a minute. And I'm back, and if you're wondering just how I got back so quickly, it's with the clever cutting of that dead space when I left the camera. So it's not that I actually disappeared for a second and a half, but it sure looks like that. In any case, interruptions aside, so going back to this, so we have Fantasy Series Line 1, Fantasy Series Line 2, Lasting Tales, and components for Lasting Tales, all available in this campaign, all giving you the option to bundle things up. And we have 18 days to go, and we are already at over 150 miniatures. I have to double check exactly where they are up to. but I believe they're up to roughly 161 miniatures, or well, if it's 161, that's not roughly. I believe they are up to 161 miniatures, as well as this free huge Hydra with every single pledge. They are effectively modeling both the model and the success of the original Fantasy Series 1. Now, don't get me wrong, 5,000 backers and $438,000 does not compare to 16,000 backers and over $1 million. But we have 18 days to go, and I think this one will do well. And so let's go through it. Let's go through the pledges, the options, all of that. Overall, the short version, let's go into the should you back it or not. Let's just skip straight to that. Overall, you should be jumping in on this game if you want these miniatures, or if you just care about the resale value, or if you think you'll want them down the road. There are many reasons to jump in just because the amount of miniatures you're getting at this price point. This is going to be another Blacklist Games where they run out of pledge, where they run out of stretch goals. And Blacklist Games, I've talked about this before, but they are one of the few companies that do genuine, real stretch goals. They have $5,000, every $5,000 another stretch goal, every $10,000 they do small bumps, but they don't pace the campaign to match the success. If they do well, you get more. If they don't do well, you don't get more. They really do tie into those stretch goals, and I compliment them for it. And so, with all that, let's go through what we have here. Now the reason I'm not interested in the game over here is because the game Lasting Tales is a miniature system. Now, to its credit, it is a solo/co-op miniature system, so most miniatures games are not that way. Most miniatures games are going to be, two players head-to-head, or perhaps team-based head-to-head, but they are more competitive in nature. Solo/co-op games that are miniature skirmish games, those are rarer. I only know of one that actually exists. I'm sure there are more, but they're certainly rarer in their presence in the general market or whatnot. Now, for myself, that unfortunately doesn't change my interest in it. The fact that you have this terrain, the fact that you have rulers, and let me see if I can find photos or whatnot of the actual game system. Over here, let's go down to the game system. So we have, here, let's go through this over here. We have create your hero, choose one of 5 fantasy races, 10 unique classes, form your party, embark on a quest, battle countless monsters, grow in power, and continue your journey. Now, you can play the demo of this game if you want to download the rules and then just use whatever miniatures you have from any game, because it is specifically meant to be utilized with any miniatures you have from any system whatsoever, any terrain, any miniatures, any whatever, and then go ahead and prep your army, create your hero, go on your quest, and experience it. You can try all that to see if this is a system you'll enjoy. For myself, I spent years playing Warhammer way back in the day, and while I love miniatures in my board games, I don't love miniatures games, if that makes sense. It's a fine line, it's a distinction. But you show me a ruler and a bunch of dice system and a grid of stats, and I tune out from today until tomorrow. I am interested in the ease of jumping into a game like Zombicide, into a game like Cthulhu Death May Die, or a game like Gloomhaven. They don't have to be light in order for me to enjoy them, but they do have to be confined, closed systems, not building out and developing my armies and having my stats, and I have 2 agility and 14 speed. If you have 14 speed, you're probably doing pretty well, and I'm going to go ahead and measure, and I'm going to move 4.5 inches across the table, and you've put this terrain over here, so you have a +2 modifier to defense. I don't personally enjoy that anymore. It's too in-depth of a system. I think there's a huge target market for it. Of these 5,000 backers, I have no idea how many of them, or how many of you for that matter, are backing it for the line of miniatures versus how many of you are backing it for the game. So, and we can check to a degree just by going through the pledge levels. We have 161 people at the Lasting Tales tier. We have 2,499 people at the Fantasy Series 2. We have 1,366 at the Epic tier, and 339 at the Legendary. So it looks like the bulk of people are coming in at the Fantasy Series 2 tier, the straight up for the miniatures, although that still leaves a lot of people who are backing at other tiers as well. Do we have any $1 tiers? I don't think so. So all those other backers are going to be hidden behind whatever this pledge without a reward system is. And so all of that there is just why I personally am not interested. It does not mean it's a game system that's wrong for you. If you enjoy miniatures games, if you feel that a solo/co-op miniatures game is something that you'd be interested in, then I recommend downloading this demo. I mean, go ahead. It's free access. Try it out. Read the rules. See if this is for you. And then go ahead and spend $40 in buying the Lasting Tales thing. Now, I will mention none of this video is going to be about the should you back it value of a Lasting Tales rule set. This is not a market I know at all. I have no knowledge whatsoever of the resale market of, miniatures, rulebooks or whatnot, Warhammer core set rules, whatever it is, 6.0. I don't know any of that stuff, so I'm not commenting on that. But I will comment on the resale value of the miniatures because, well, we've already seen it. This is going to be their 3rd campaign, and we've already seen the development of their pricing model, because the pricing they are giving you here, while not as good of a deal as the original Blacklist miniature series, it is very, 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 very close. And so, I recommend watching Joel Eddy drive-through reviews. He had coverage of the game. This is going to be his quote over here. He had coverage of the game system, how he liked it. He seemed to enjoy it. So, there's a few other videos as well in case you want to check out whatever content creator speaks to you as far as actually having played the game. I have not played the game whatsoever. I'm only commenting on, well, the miniatures and all that. We have Adam Smith from Rolling Solo. If you like proxy miniatures into your board games like I do, these miniatures are a must-have, although granted, that does sound more like a commentary about the miniatures than it does about the actual Lasting Tales game. And this game is designed, by the way, by Mark Latham, who has a lot of experience in miniatures games. So this is not from the Saylor brothers specifically themselves. I don't know if they were involved in the actual design of the game, but overall they brought in a specific miniatures game person to design the game system. Now I don't know if they still have plans down the road for other ways to utilize these miniatures. But if they do, I'm still interested in a board game around them. I backed Fantasy Tales Series 1, and it's not the kind of thing I usually or typically would back. It's not the kind of thing that I don't usually get miniatures on their own. I don't plug and play my miniatures. I like my confined board games. If I haven't already made that clear, I enjoy that confined system. And with all of that, let's go through the stretch goals and then the optional buys and then the pledge levels. So, starting off at the top, we're going to have the Lasting Tales tier, which is going to give you $40 for that, for that core book over there. For the Fantasy Series 2 tier, we have $75. That's going to be a $10 bump over the original $65 option you had in the original campaign, and that's going to give you, well, a lot of miniatures. But it's worth noting, starting off the bat, we basically have a role reversal of the original Fantasy Series. Instead of having a female human barbarian, a male human cleric, a male dwarf fighter, a male gnome rogue, and a female halfling bard, we have the exact opposites. We have a male human barbarian, a female human cleric, a female dwarf fighter, a female gnome rogue, and a male halfling bard, and that's going to continue down the page. We're going to see both a gender swap, so to speak, of different characters and character classes, as well as some of the characters, such as, for instance, over here, once we scroll down over here, instead of having 5 goblins and 5 kobolds, we're going to have 5 goblin archers and 5 kobold archers. Now, that's not a bad thing. I'm not saying that as a criticism at all. I am saying that so that you yourself are aware, in case you're thinking, I'm getting 100 and who knows, 150 plus maybe 200. They will probably run out of stretch goals. I'm getting 200 or so miniatures that are totally different than the last batch. Well, there's going to be different ones. There's going to be new and unique and interesting ones, but they're not totally different than the last batch. There's going to be overlap and or alternate classes and or alternate unit types or whatever it is for similar miniatures you've had before. Again, not a bad thing, just walk in knowing what you're getting. So you're going to have all of those in the base pledge over here going down for those first 10 classes, which are just role reversals, which are gender reversals. We're going to have the goblin archers, the kobold archers, the 5 orc archers. We're going to have the 5 wraiths in their translucent pale green. It's going to be different than the translucent pale blue, I think it was. We're going to have 5 wormlings, 5 hobgoblins, some skeleton archers, some gnoll archers, some mimics. Mimics are always adorable. Those tons snaking out of the treasure chest. I mean, I don't know who's reaching their hand into that, but they probably should stop now. We're going to have some giant snakes, some giant scorpions, some town guards, and that is the base game of the Fantasy Series line 2. But that's not everything you're getting, because that is roughly 50 miniatures, and we're supposed to have 160 roughly at this point already. And so, we're going to go through the stretch goals. So to begin with, you have that huge Hydra, which is going to be added for free to anyone who's back in the game. This is already unlocked. It's available. It's going to be the equivalent of that large dragon. Doesn't seem to be as large as the original dragon from the, let's see if we can scroll down here, from the original line. So over here we have, where's the dragon? Where's the dragon? They had a dragon. I think they revised the pledge levels of the way they hid this over here, but they definitely had a dragon somewhere on the page. I don't know where it is. It's this dragon over here. I just don't know where it actually is on the page. But in any case, we'll go back to here. So we have a female dwarf barbarian. We have 5 bears. Bears. I always do this. I say 5 beers. I just say beer. And every time I say beer, I get like 4 comments talking about the fact that I just said beer, B-E-E-R, when it's really bear. And that's fine. I just mispronounce things, and that's... I still feel I have worth. I have value. It's okay, Alex. It's okay. Anyways, going on from there, we have male elf cleric. Now I'm saying male elf cleric. Male elf cleric. We have a centaur. We have female half elf fighter. We have boy villager. We have male half orc rogue. We have 5 panthers. Panthers are cool. I like panthers. Don't know what they're going to do in this game, but I like them. Again, keep in mind, open system, so who knows what's utilized, what's plug and play, all of that. We have female elf bard. We have a girl villager. We have the male gnome paladin. We have the manticore. Manticores are always cool. There's going to be a large miniature with 2-inch base. We have a female halfling monk. We have 5 female bandits, female human druid, the cook, the male dwarf ranger, the 5 whites. We have male human wizard, the minotaur with a large 2-inch base, the male elf barbarian, the 5 female cultists, the female gnome cleric, the orc warlord, the male human fighter, the griffin with a large 2-inch base, the female elf rogue, the 5 wolves, the male dwarf bard, the cyclops with a 3-inch base. That's another large one. This can be the equivalent of the female giant from last time. We have the female half-orc paladin, we have the goblin boss, the female human monk, 5 falcons. Falcons are amazing. I like birds. I want more birds in my games. I wonder if they come on the tree trunk. I wonder how that works. Male half-elf druid, the etin with a 2-inch base, the female halfling ranger, the apothecary, the female dwarf wizard. $350,000 is going to bring you to 5 cats. We all need more cats in our board games. Female half-elf barbarian, the chimera, is it chimera? I think it's chimera, right? I'm probably saying that incorrectly. The chimera, a 2-inch base. The male dwarf cleric, the gnoll packmaster, the male halfling fighter, 5 dogs to complement those cats, male human rogue, bandit captain, and female half-orc bard. And that's where we are right now. $10,000 gas between stretch goals. This may or may not close off at like $600,000. If you look at the original, I believe it closed off at roughly $600,000 for all the stretch goals. I think that's roughly where they said we're out. That's it. And they still managed to hit $1.5 million. A good reminder that if you bring something good to the table, $525,000. That's what it ended off. A good reminder that if you bring something good to the table, people are not only backing for stretch goals. If there's enough content, enough value, enough reason to back, then people will be all in on that. And so going to those pledge levels over here, so we have social activity, none of which has been officially unlocked. I don't know if this is because they haven't updated it or if because it hasn't been unlocked, but none of those are unlocked. And from over there, we have the Fantasy Series 1 available for $125. Keep in mind, that was originally $65. Every time they have offered it since, they offered it in the Dire Lions horror campaign as well. It has seen a huge price bump in terms of what the actual pricing of that is. You got Kickstarter exclusive pricing, something they talk about in the FAQ, which is the idea that they're saying, not only is this Kickstarter exclusive, this is exclusive to this campaign. This is your buy-in to a new product line, and therefore you're getting the best price we will ever give anyone. In the future, we'll offer it in the Pledge Manager for a hike, so if you come to this later in the Pledge Manager, it's going to be more expensive. And if you come to it in future campaigns, it's going to be significantly more expensive. Again, $65 to $125, that's a nearly doubling of the price point for the original Fantasy Series 1. If we see this Fantasy Series 2 go from $75 to $125, which I do not think is unreasonable at all, I mean, that's a no-brainer. If you're interested at all, you should be getting it now, right? And to those pledge levels, we have $40 is going to give you, and then also, by the way, Horror Series Pack is available as well, in case you want in on the Dire Lions Horror as well. And then let's cover some of these hero card packs. These are going to be 154 cards. Again, they're giving you things that are in the core system, in the Lasting Tales rulebook, but it's more accessible. You can have these printed out, whatever. We have adversary card packs for $20. We have accessory pack for $15. Some treasure chest miniatures for $15. Some dice for $10. And that's basically going to be all the optional buys we have, at least as of now. Now, for those pledge levels, $40 is going to get you the Lasting Tales core book, $75 is getting you the Fantasy Series 2, that's $75, and then $109 is getting you both. Effectively, they're giving you, instead of what would be $115, you get a $6 discount for getting both at the same time. Depending on how you want to look at that, that either brings the core book down to $34, or the Fantasy Series 2 down to, what is it, $69? $69 sounds about right. Then from there we have the $225 is going to bring you the legendary tier. Effectively, if instead $125 Fantasy Series Line 1, you can get for $225 minus $109, $116 instead of $125 if you bundle them all together, so another $9 saving on the original Fantasy Series 1. Still not nowhere near as good as the original Fantasy Series, so again, that goes back to the conversation here. The should you back it is pretty simple. In terms of if you want this game, they have done Blacklist games. I mean, even though I'm not interested in this campaign, I still haven't decided if I'm backing it. I don't even know how or why I'm using those original miniatures, and good value or not, I don't typically back things just to resell them, so I am still unclear on my own interest level. It's possible that as the stretch goals continue to grow, if they do cross that 200 miniature mark, maybe I'll just be pulled in, because if I use them, great, and if I don't, they'll definitely hold their value, so maybe I'll end up backing it from that stance alone. But ultimately, the should you back it is pretty simple. If you are interested or think you will be interested in it, then you should be backing this. This is going to follow the same trend as the original Blacklist series miniatures line. The Dire Lions horror line I couldn't be as confident about. I thought initially I was more confident than as the campaign developed, because initially it had that day one spike, and then the campaign kind of fizzled along the way for the rest of the campaign, and so those 100 miniatures barely grew once we passed those first few days. Versus over here, we're seeing that growth, we're seeing that development, we're seeing people jump on board and continue to jump on board because people still want more miniatures, more medieval fantasy miniatures for their board games. And so if you're interested in this game, I recommend backing it. If you think you'll be interested later, I recommend backing it. If you have no idea what you're going to do with 200 miniatures on your table and you have no plans for them whatsoever, then I mean, cheap is good, but why are you backing something you're not going to use? I mean, you can try. In terms of resale value, I think you'll have no problem whatsoever reselling these down the road, especially if they continue to see that jump. Because if Blacklist Games is pricing a line at $125 and people are still buying in on that, keep in mind, every single one of these 339 people inherently decided that $116 price tag was worth it to them. So if they decided $116 was worth it and you're buying this for $75, down the road, you should have no problem selling this at all. That's basically everything. That's why I'm covering this campaign, because it did better than the last one did, which I am happy to see. I'm happy for Blacklist Games. That's a wrap on everything. Until next time, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. I hope you enjoyed this video, and as always, have a good one.